provided on the recreational flow assessment that was done as part of that. 2023, the Upper Barker Dam, just a mile or so upstream from the Lower Barker, is due for a relicensing. Starting 5 years before that, we would expect that they would probably start that process either this year or early next year at the latest. So we'll be engaged during your term on the relicensing of the Lower and Upper Barker dams. Those facilities have gathered the interest of a lot of federal agencies. I think probably to a bit of surprise for the applicant. They're smaller facilities, but the National Park Service had been involved with recreational assets along the Little Androscoggin through the Androscoggin Land Trust, so they already had familiarity and some of their resources involved in that project, as well as salmon habitat is a major focus along the Androscoggin watershed, and the Great Falls here outside of our windows were a barrier to all but the strongest of salmon even before the dams were there. So the Little Androscoggin played a key role in salmon migration and breeding over time for that area. The fish passage will be a major issue in that. The national agencies are really pushing for that. The Little Androscoggin, Lower Barker is the first barrier between here and the Atlantic Ocean at this point that's not already required to have fish passage under a current license. Lewiston Falls, Monty Hydro, there's some detailed information in your packet. That's the large Great Falls shared by Lewiston and Auburn here. Lewiston and Auburn have some shared agreements by contract about that facility. Auburn gets a portion of the tax revenues from the Monty Hydro that eventually was built in Lewiston. Originally it was planned for Auburn, and through negotiations for that facility, Auburn ended up with an agreement with Lewiston until 2034 to receive shared tax from that facility. It varies from about 140 or 50,000 to maybe 175,000 per year that Auburn receives from the tax revenues from that facility. As part of that, we also share in water rights, and there's more details in your packet about this. Water rights that are diverted from that facility down through the canals in Lewiston. And as Lewiston looks to take ownership of the canals and amend the FERC licenses for the larger facility to exclude the canals, we're going to have some discussions during your term about what happens with those water rights. Maybe there's a way to extend the tax sharing agreement in exchange for giving up water rights. We'll have to talk through that during your term. Right now in that process, FERC has an application to remove the canals from the license for that hydro facility, and we expect to hear more in the coming months about when that should be finalized, and Brookfield will transfer ownership of that land to Lewiston, as well as the canals. Along with the water rights comes some responsibility to help maintain the canals. So that's kind of a liability that is out there as Lewiston takes ownership of that. We're going to have to talk to them about whether or not we could get out of that liability as part of giving up our water rights, and there may be more of a push on Lewiston's part to spend more money upgrading and maintaining the canals than there has been in the past. So that's something that we want to make sure we minimize Auburn's liability on. I know there's a lot of information in your packet. 10 minutes is a really short amount of time to talk about all these facilities, but I do want to make sure we talk a little bit about the Gulf Island Deer Rips license. Deer Rips is the next dam upriver from the one we can see here in our downtown. Often goes unnoticed. There's really no public boat access to that impoundment. And most of it's pretty shallow and not easily boatable anyways. There is the North River Road access to the impoundment right above the dam here downtown, but then above the Deer Rips, there's very limited public access to that impoundment until you get up to the next dam, Gulf Island, and that creates what's called Gulf Island Pond. There is access to that facility by boat in Turner, but that's 9 miles upriver from Auburn, from the dam in Auburn. That's an opportunity that I think warrants some consideration during your term. Brookfield is obligated to build a boat launch to that impoundment that abuts Maine's newest state park, the Androscoggin Riverlands. I think there's a great opportunity to be the southern access to that impoundment in Maine's newest state park. But we also have to work through some issues depending on where it is. East Auburn was the proposed location. Then there were some real concerns by the community that boat traffic would impact their lives in that neighborhood. So I think that's something that this council should probably think about, decide if there's a place for that that doesn't impact the neighborhood, or if there are other improvements that maybe could be made to the neighborhood to make it safe to accommodate that boat traffic. But with Maine's newest state park on that impoundment, it is a real opportunity to increase our recreational opportunities in town to have water access to that. Coming up on the 10-minute mark, this image on the left is a concept plan for a 40-space trailered boat launch. Brookfield would build that if there was a place within our community that we would welcome it. The last time we had discussed it with the East Auburn neighborhood, which is where they proposed it, they were concerned, and it sort of got put on hold until could be discussed again. There really is a lot of interest in people using that section of river. There's out-of-staters on the river paying guides to go pike fishing, bass fishing, stuff that we really probably wouldn't have expected to happen there 10 years ago. And I think as the river gets cleaner, there's more and more people water skiing and wakeboarding out there, a lot of people camping and fishing. There is a real opportunity to increase recreational usage of that impoundment. And threw in just a picture at the bottom of this. It's the only time I've ever caught a double smallmouth was on that stretch of river, and caught it on one lure. So it doesn't happen very often in freshwater. So I'm 11 minutes in. Happy to answer a few questions, but want to stay on schedule too.
Thank you, Mr. Cousins, for this. One quick question. I'll open up to the rest of the council. When you say East Auburn, are you referring to just north of East Auburn Elementary School?
Yes. You would
the dead end?
You would drive by the school to get to the dead end where Brookfield had proposed this boat launch.
Yeah, is that city-owned land adjacent to the river right now, or is that privately owned?
It's owned by Brookfield. So it's
by
privately owned by the hydropower operator.
Okay, very good. Thank you. At this point, I'll open up to the council for any questions. Start off with Councilor Young.
Nothing at this time.
Councilor Lasagna.
Yes, I understand how complex this planning is and how many you're braiding together a whole bunch of different interests. And I just hope that there's the continued conversation with Lewiston, because this really is an incredible opportunity for recreational access. Thank you for the work.
Thank you.
Councilor Hayes.
Not at this time.
Councilor Titus.
Nothing for a question, but a comment. I think the last presentation we had there talked about, we have the National Fish and Wildlife, whatever guy that was here.
Yes.
And he was talking about their intentions of forcing them to put a fish ladder in, which would pretty much, from what I can see, kill any investment possibilities. And what would that mean to us if that goes through like that?
The national fisheries agencies are pushing very hard to prescribe a fish ladder for the lower Barker. And I would guess that they would prescribe that at the upper Barker too when that comes up. It's important for their fisheries restoration, but the lower Barker, based on the financials that were given as part of their application, appears to lose about $2,000 a year. They've continued to operate it because it's probably cheaper to fund the $2,000 loss as part of a large hydro portfolio than it is to pay for the removal. If they do require the fish ladder, as Councilor Titus said, it may make more sense for them to consider decommissioning and eliminating that facility than it does to fund the fish ladder. I think there would be a long-term conversation about that and how can we bring fisheries-related interests and funding, whether that's federal funding or Trout Unlimited or conservation funds, to try to fund that dam removal. But it would mean the elimination of that impoundment and potentially, you know, it'd have to be paid for somehow. I don't think that that would fall on the municipality. I think there are a lot of opportunities for funding for fish passage restoration that we could seek, but that would take some effort and a long-term discussion, I think, to sort through those details.
Okay, just curious to see, but thank you.
Councilor Fournier?
Yes, I agree with Councilor Lasagna in terms of maintaining conversation, open communication with Lewiston. That's really imperative. The other thing is that this is a really good thing because we're taking care of our rivers now, and we have less of an issue up north. You know, it's still there, the paper mills are still there, but, you know, they're so much better than they were in years past. So what comes to mind is A River Runs Through It is a book, a child's book. And it's about the rivers and how they were and then how they are now and how it takes people to make that happen. I think this is great. It's one of those spokes in the wheel of looking at tourism and revitalizing our community. This is really excellent. I really appreciate that. And the last thing is, when did we become Maine's newest state park here?
So the Androscoggin Riverlands has been in existence for, it's pushing 10 years now, 5 to 7, I would say, and it is still, as far as I know, still the newest state park.
That's great.
If you haven't been there, it's worth checking out, and they're slowly developing trails and events and things like that more and more, and I think over time, there's a lot of room for increased usage there.
Super. That's great. Thank you.
Councilor Walker?
Could you tell us, is there another area we could go in for the recreation boating and public to use other than in the East Auburn Road?
There is other river frontage. You know, East Waterman is one area where there is other river frontage. It's not as deep there. At the time, Brookfield had claimed that this was as far as water depth, suitable for a boat launch, this spot was close to an existing road and it had the water depth, but we could explore other options. It could end up on the other side of the river. It doesn't have to be in Auburn, but there is a mandate that they provide a southern access, boat access to the river if the communities want it.
So going towards Turner, then, there is an area we could maybe sneak into that river?
There are other places, and we'd have to talk to those neighborhoods. You know, the East Waterman neighborhood may have the same concerns with increased traffic.
I'm sure it's going to do that no matter where we put it, if we're
I
going to
think
have
so.
boating, you know.
But there may be ways to make people comfortable with it too, if they had adequate sidewalks. East Auburn neighborhood really lacks sidewalks along a lot of their roads to have that kind of traffic.
Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there any way that we could petition the licensing board or body or governing body to shorten the time a little bit? The ones that, because you said that we're only given a chance to comment on license renewals every 30 to 50 years. I mean, most of us here aren't going to be around well, I know I'm not going to be here in another 30 or 50 years. And as the rivers and the streams get more cleaner and people are taking an interest and do more and more things on there, I think that if we could have less time to go to the table to try to talk with the people that, you know, take out the licenses, you know, the different power companies, then maybe we could negotiate things so that we could gain more access and stuff, because to bring them to the table, because if they've got 30 years or 50 years, they can not agree to come sit with us when we need to discuss things on what we'd like to do around their water or their dam facilities.
I think they are leaning more towards the 30-year time frame on a lot of the new licenses. But we're kind of in I guess, a fortunate time in the term of these licenses, because we really have, by 2021, we'll be engaged in the licensing process on those first 3 facilities, which is only a few years away, and then in another 10 years, the bigger one upriver. But there are existing requirements like the boat launch that we could already be pushing for if we want those, as well as some other recreational funding things along the rivers.
I mean, we've had a lot of issues about that underground water conduit over by Barker Mill, of it leaking and stuff. I don't know if we would have been able to, between the city and Auburn Housing, to force them to fix their issues if they weren't coming up so quick for their relicensing, because that was getting to be very dangerous in the winter with the ice buildup. I mean, I don't know how many people with car vehicles would have slid on the roads, and how much money it costs the city with their public works crews to come to keep scraping ice or to salt or treat the ice buildup and stuff. And I can't count on my hands how many times it did spring up leaks in the bank and over at Barker, and it flooded Barker Mills driveway, and the parking lot filled water, and it froze car tires up to where you put the air in the tires.
I think the licensing process did put pressure on them. I hope it's fixed now. I believe it is.
But I am encouraged by all the good things that Auburn has done with all the grants and the development that they've done, we've done, and all the grants we're able to get to, and all the volunteers that did the work on the Barker Trail, because I've been seeing more and more people taking advantage of being able to walk the nature trail there, as well as the fishermen and the people that go down over the bank where my apartment, outside my apartment where it's located, because the people go down over the bank and go do fishing, and you'd be amazed at when it's nicer weather, the amount of people that do that and get the, I mean, you get there. When it's nice weather, I like to sit outside my door of my apartment and watch the people fish. It'd be amazing. And then also you got a few people tenting across the river down over the bank and from the railroad tracks.
Mr. Creighton, comments?
Just a quick comment. I'd be remiss if I did not point out that we had originally planned another workshop for this time period, and the individual contacted me this morning by email and indicated he wouldn't be able to be here, so I went and spoke with Eric, and we coordinated that with Michael Chamings, and Eric was able to put this together this afternoon. He knows a lot about a lot of things, as you'll find out if you don't know that already, and this is an issue that he's well versed in, but I want to thank Eric for being here this evening and presenting the information. We have a lot more to do on this subject, but thank you, Eric.
And Mr. Cousins, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And on this is pretty interesting, and it's relevant too, of course. With that said, we are going to now move on to the next workshop item with Mr. Cousins leading the charge here on zone change. 186 Main Street.
Zach Mosier, our city planner, is here, and he has brought this item through the planning board. He'll take the lead here if I can just get his presentation open.
Good evening, Mayor Levesque, Council, and City Manager. So just to give you a quick history of 186 Main Street, we, staff made a quick presentation at the November Planning Board meeting, and then we brought it back for a longer presentation in January, looking for approval to recommend a motion of approval to the City Council at that meeting, and they voted unanimously to approve this zone change. But if you'll go ahead, Eric. So 186 Main Street is, if you go one more, 186 Main Street is kind of almost perpendicular to Drummond Street, down by the river here, just a little ways down here. And it's a city-owned property. It's approximately 5,500 square feet, or 0.13 acres. And it's currently Zone T 4.2. And over the course of those two planning board meetings, staff presented some reasons why we think it's more appropriate to be T 5.2. Those include allowing greater density, a more urban type development there. We think it's a nice piece of property by the river, And to really maximize the redevelopment potential of this property, we thought switching it over to 5.2 would give a greater flexibility in terms of building size as well as building height. And I think at the time when the form-based code was implemented, not enough, looking back on it, we think just extending the 5.1 down to the 4.2 makes more sense here. There's a piece of property to the south of this that's got a vacant kind of lot next to it, and we think this property just fits more in line with the street wall that exists to the north from the corner of Court and Maine down. And we believe the 5.1 zoning district would give that street wall, continue that street wall down to this property. I think. And this kind of illustrates that point where this is a Google Street View looking south at this property. You can see there's a bit of a break here to the next property. It's kind of vacant in there. And then this is looking towards, towards us here and down towards Gritty's. And we think, switching the zoning will better fulfill the street wall that exists here. And just to add, an RFP was developed over the summer, and that's when staff really seriously started looking at this. We haven't received any proposals, but we thought during the review process that T5.1 made more sense for the property.
Who owns the property, the other side of it, on your third picture back?
This picture?
The lot south adjacent.
One more picture. I think you had a better picture of it.
Dark green.
One more, I think. Yes,
So
where your cursor is.
it's
Who
one
owns
parcel
that?
right there. I don't know who owns it. It's a multifamily right there, but this is just, the property's not in the best of shape right now, and it's just vacant.
And I could add, it's a local rental property owner. He owns the building just to the south of what appears to be the vacant lot, and it's combined as one parcel, Halsey McDonough. The building is occupied. He would like to keep that property for future parking, but it's an investment property for him.
So everyone understands, would you tell us the difference between T4 and T5 in height, width, whatever?
I think the parking remains the same for both zoning districts, but I think really we're looking for the reduced setbacks that the 5.1 offers. We can go down to 0 foot setbacks, both side and front on that. And I think the big one is allowing a 4-story building in the T5.1, whereas the 4.2 only allows a 3-story. And I think, I'm not sure if there's a lot coverage percentage difference, but I do know that the building width can be greater in the 5.1 than what's allowed in the 4.2 as well.
The one to the north, is that right now a T5, the brick one?
Yes, yep, that's where it stops right now.
That one, yep.
Okay, Mr. Mosher, we'll let you finish, and the council will ask any more questions.
Yep, I'm good.
You're good?
Yep.
That was like all of 4 minutes. It's awesome.
Thanks.
Congratulations. Okay. Those are some great questions. Is there any more questions? Instead of going in order due to time constraints, is there any more pertinent questions before we ask for next steps?
I have a quick question. Thank you, Councilor Walker. That was really helpful in terms of asking that question to clarify what that meant. So in terms of form-based code, what you're doing is you're able to move it up to the sidewalk and kind of mimic what is going on with this building,
Yes, correct.
but potentially add another story.
Yeah,
That would be the main difference.
I think so. I
Okay.
think the greater height, 1 story more, and the greater building coverage.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question.
Mr. Young?
Yes. I know there's been some discussion in the past about having open space there, and I know the city presently owns this piece of property that we want to rezone. Are we abandoning the idea that having the view of the river?
The city started looking at the city-owned properties over the past few years, and it was decided that this one would be better to continue the existing pattern of development. It does have value for views, I suppose. That could be incorporated into a final design. There still could be a public access point. We did talk with some developers that liked the lot, but needed a little more flexibility to make the project feasible, and we could certainly work with them to incorporate an access point, visual and maybe pedestrian through that lot.
I'm not advocating for either side. I just wondered if the plan that we've had, I know the former mayor often got upset when we tore down some buildings and then built even bigger ones.
Yeah, I think you could take a position on either direction on that. This one, I think, could have a lot of value for a downtown lot, and taking advantage of the river views as part of the development, but you do lose a little bit of that pedestrian view from the street.
And we're not talking about storefronts here for downtown, we're talking residents.
I think the ideal situation, based on comp plan and T51 zoning, would be commercial first floor and either office or residences on the second floor, and then residential above that.
And parking probably be available like where it is now, near the riverfront?
Combination of parking on site, but probably heavily relying on public parking, the parking that's behind this site, as well as the parking garage and the surface lot.
Thank you.
And just for the record, this mayor likes building stuff. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Walker?
the T5 doesn't mean we have to have businesses on the street level, though, does it?
No.
Fine.
So, excuse me, Councilor Hayes?
Just a real quick question. With respect to the adjoining southerly property that's vacant, was the property owner asked whether he'd like to be changed his zoning as well?
He was asked if he wanted to possibly have some of his land incorporated into the eventual development along that stretch, and he didn't want to talk to us about that. He wanted to preserve his ability to build parking there someday for his existing lot.
Does the new ordinance change, hypothetically, if we did extend that down to more lots in a southerly fashion, preclude someone from having parking or maintaining existing usage?
No, it doesn't preclude them from using it for parking. It could, in either way, that private property could be used for parking to serve the existing building.
So without proposing a major rezoning of that strip of Main Street, does it make sense looking forward that there's any other, whether it be city-owned lots or available lots that could be made more valuable and developable if we extended that zoning down?
There really is a transition in the character of that neighborhood right in that area. I think whether or not it's where it is now or one lot down doesn't have a great impact, but at some point along that stretch you really start getting into more of the T42 style neighborhood. You could go another lot, but I didn't get the sense that he was supportive of working with us on that.
Very good, thank you. If there's any other comments, Manager Creighton, I just wanted to know what the next steps were on this at post-workshop.
So we were just obviously looking for feedback, and whenever we can, we'll schedule a first reading and a public hearing at some point. But right now, just a workshop, obviously, and feedback.
So to summarize, we have a city-owned parcel of land that we want to propose through staff to change the zoning ordinance on that land in order to make it more marketable, more enticing for sale to a private developer to develop something in an otherwise vacant and probably long-term vacant land if this change doesn't happen. Correct? Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, I would like to keep in mind as well, I know that we need, after what we have just discussed in terms of the Troy Street project, and we're hearing a lot of comments, following that, I would like to make sure that there is enough public input on this. Councilor Young made a good point in terms of, you know, the water view and, you know, is it going to be, you know, obstructing view? So we're looking at two things, wanting to revitalize, wanting to find, you know, the best bang for our buck for that, but also if you're going to take a ride down that street, conceivably you'll never see the river, you know? And so that's just something, food for thought to keep in mind.
Right. Yeah, and right now, let's just be very clear. It's just about opening up the free market approach to development and potential development in an otherwise vacant lot, which we desperately need in Auburn due to the housing crunch that we currently have, as well as more development downtown. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next workshop item right now. We look forward to seeing this in its next stages coming forth to the council. Next on the agenda is, and thank you very much, Mr. Mosier and Mr. Cousins, you're all set.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is supposedly our discussion on Sesquicentennial Anniversary Committee and the launch by former Mayor Jonathan Labonte. Unfortunately, Mr. Labonte is stuck with weather in Augusta. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to skip ahead to the next workshop session, which is an executive session. And if we're out of executive session while the workshop's still going on and he's here, then we'll allow him to speak. So we'll move a little bit out of order on this one. If not, if he can get to us later on during public comment, we'll go for that. Okay, so at this point, we're going to move into executive session regarding economic development pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 405 6C. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilor Titus and a second by Councilor Walker to enter into executive session by a vote of hands. All approved, all non-approved, or denied, abstaining, 0. Motion carries 7-0. We are now in executive session. To the office. Hey, Jonathan. Do you want to try to do this? Thank you.
Oh, what's the, how do you get out? You just hit
Folks,
this
we're going to
back?
get back to our executive session here.
Out of it.
Did you say out of?
Do I have to say we're out of executive
Out,
session?
yeah.
Yeah, and now you can go to his presentation.
Okay, hello, folks. We are now out of executive session. We're going to be moving into the next and last workshop item tonight, which is an update from Mr. Jonathan Labonte, former Auburn mayor, on our sesquicentennial anniversary committee. And Mr. Labonte, you have the floor, please.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Manager Creighton, it's good to be here speaking with you. Within your council packet, there was a memo that I had provided, so I'll be brief since that speaks for itself, but certainly for those watching at home that may not have seen, we have scheduled a first meeting, sort of a brainstorming meeting for January 31st at 6 p.m. That will be at the Auburn Public Library in the community room. I've built a list right now. I'm at about 50 organizations or individuals that have gotten a direct invitation from me to be part of that first conversation. Everything from groups related to the history of Auburn, faith-based groups, neighborhood groups, owners of historic buildings, and the like, that may either have an interest in playing a role or may, through conversation with partners and others, find a role that they can play. I'm not sure whether the intent is to have a full committee appointed. I'm of the mindset that we'll see who shows up on the 31st and others who reach out to play a role, and that the committee is going to be a working committee. So my goal, while we have a staff liaison in Sabrina Best from the Recreation Department, that this won't be a committee that meets to ask staff to do the work. This will be a committee of folks willing to do the work with a staff liaison that can help access city resources as needed. So I'll leave it at that for now. I certainly can plan to, I'm planning to have once a month meetings, and we'll see how that first conversation goes. And I can provide a monthly update to the full council, seeking your feedback and certainly any connections that folks plan to make. I'm planning at least the next 4 to 6 weeks to travel and meet with various groups, including the Neighborhood Watch Circuit, to gauge the interest of individual neighborhoods within Auburn to play a role, whether that's citywide or in their own backyard.
Well, great. Thank you very much for the update. I ask all councilors to be conscious of time. But if there's any questions for Mr. Labonte now, please, we'll start with Councilor Gary on the left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not exactly, well, I was going to say it's not exactly a question, but I was discussing with the mayor that we should or could possibly maybe update those pictures on the painted wall. Well, you know what I'm talking about. Maybe deal. It's funny having you on this side of the room instead of that side of the room. Would you being there and me here, and so now I'm.
It's refreshing.
Right. No, I know,
Refreshing.
and I'd heard you before mention, you know, that certainly the artwork on that wall on Main Street has been up for quite a while. If there's interest in floating concepts on how that may be tackled, one of the things I am doing, I'm meeting with the state historian for lunch next week to better understand other models other communities have used for these celebrations, but also trying to identify other funding sources. So I want to get some sense of how the corporate fundraising in other communities worked. But there's also philanthropic money and state and federal money that can be helpful. So as you know, that the first rendition of that art wall was done with CDBG resources.
Right.
I know those are very tight resources, so if there's interest, whether it's historic images or soliciting new artwork, identifying potential funding sources for those types of projects would certainly, I'm hoping to be able to bring those options back through the manager's office to you folks to contemplate. And the hope is mapping out some of the financial components can happen in the next 2 to 3 months, so you can at least be eyes wide open since your next fiscal year budget will roll into the sesquicentennial year.
I mean, I was hoping that Auburn residents that could work with that type of medium could possibly donate their art in a size that would fit appropriately, or even do a collage of pictures to depict Auburn's history. And I mean, I just think it would be just so cool to see that whole wall envisioned with pictures of our whole rich history. And I mean, if you look at the wall now, it's got a lot of good pictures, but then to me, they're not holding my heart as well as seeing pictures of things from my past and even some of my present things dealing with Auburn. And I've been 2 or 3 of my neighbors that paint.
I'm sorry, Councilor Gary.
I'm hurrying.
Okay,
I'm hurrying.
just
It's
if we have just a couple more
30
seconds, please.
I know, I'm sorry. That they can work with that medium, and that they have expressed that, you know, they pull me by the suit coat saying, you know, tell me, can we, you know, donate our art? And I said that I'd keep them posted with what you're doing.
I will
That's
follow.
it.
I will follow up with you so I can have a chance to connect with them.
Thank you.
So I would encourage all members of the council to really get involved in this over the upcoming weeks and months, help the process along. There's a lot of great ideas out there. I will say, overarching though, there's a couple things that we're going to need from out of this process initially, and I think you hit the nail on the head. A good budget, a good schedule of events, at least roughly that 30,000-foot view, and it's something that we all need to be wrapping our minds around. Talking to anybody that we see with regards to community partnerships, sponsorships, ideas, thought leaders. There's a lot of folks out there that we all touch, and if we can get those individuals and get them in front of Mr. Labonte and get them part of the process, we're going to be better off, and it's going to be a better event. So, with that said, thank you very much.
I have one question for that.
Mr. Titus?
Thank you, Jonathan, for doing this for us. Appreciate it. One question. Do you think it would be better for us to provide a budget to the committee, or would it be better for the committee to first deliberate and provide guidelines before we start talking about what the city may need to do?
If you could give me a couple of meetings to see who we have as folks that are committed to sort of be engaged as a volunteer and active, and try to map that out, and then we can try to sort of ballpark a conversation around that. So within the next couple of months, we can bring some sense of that. Some of it could be challenge resources, where the city may have an appetite to put up dollars. I think staff resources and some staff expertise will carry a ton of value. I was talking with Rosemary briefly before, while you guys were in executive session, some of the GIS capabilities, you know, the story map that was put together for the Winter Festival, those kind of tools that could use digital technologies to engage people and connect them, save you from printing, you know, thousands of brochures, for example. So in a couple of months, I'll try to bring something rough, with the hope being it outlines what might be possible for fundraising strategies, as well as grant writing strategies. And then there'll have to be some conversation about how you as a city want to tend to accepting donations. Unless you want to have a nonprofit step up to be the home of that, I think it may be best to have a city account tend to that, and other communities have done the same.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Labonte. I really appreciate
Mr.
it.
Mayor, if I might, anyone who has, any councilors who have ideas or folks that you want to connect and have plugged in, don't hesitate to email me or give them my phone number. Manager Creighton has my contact information, as does the mayor, so we can get folks plugged in. If folks can't make the meeting, I'm offering to meet, you know, one-on-one or schedule phone calls so we can get their input. So,
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you for taking this on.
Okay, I now declare the workshop closed. We'll reconvene for the regularly scheduled City Council session in approximately 3 minutes. Okay, bathroom break. I call to order the meeting of January 22nd, 2018. Do one more time, harder. There you go. Can you please join the Maine Gladiator hockey team in the Pledge of Allegiance?
And to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all.
There are no consent items on the agenda today, so I'm going to move on to the minutes of January 8th, 2018. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? None being, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the January 8th regular council meeting.
Motion to accept the minutes.
Second?
I have a motion by Councilor Walker and a second by Councilor Fournier by a show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay, moving on. Proclamation. Norway Savings Bank Arena, Maine Gladiators, U10 Squirt Team. Uh-oh. Hold on. Whereas Alex Favreau, Ryan Malekis, Ace Watson, and Will Ruthier have made their community proud as they've represented the Auburn and Lewiston area and Maine Gladiators U10 Tier 2 hockey team in the Boston Bruins Mini 1-on-1 hockey tournament and prevailing as champions. Whereas the team earned the right to represent the Maine District by winning the Maine District Showdown held in October 2017 in Augusta, a 3-versus-3 tournament sponsored by the National Hockey League Boston Bruins. With winning this tournament, the team has entered into a single elimination tournament held at the TD Garden in Boston on January 14th, 2018. Whereas the team defeated Canton, Massachusetts in their first matchup of the day by a score of 2-1. Their second game resulted in a victory over Triborough, Mass by a score of 4-0 and seeded them in the championship round against the Greater Boston Vipers. Whereas the Gladiators team played a hard-fought battle through a regulation period versus Greater Boston, which ended 0-0. The Gladiators and Greater Boston battled through 7 rounds of a shootout before the Gladiators prevailed as champions. Whereas Alex Favreau, Ryan Malekis, Ace Watson, and Will Rothier will now represent the Boston Bruins, Maine, and the Auburn and Lewiston area at the 2018 NHL All-Star Game in Tampa, Florida, being held January 26 and 28. The team will participate in a shootout competition against 13 under-10 youth hockey programs from around the country, representing their respective NHL teams. Now, therefore, the Mayor of Auburn wishes to commend Axel, Ryan, Ace, and Will on their tremendous accomplishments and continued success as they travel to Tampa, Florida, to represent the Boston Bruins during the 2018 NHL All-Star Game. If I can get the young gentleman up to the front here, I'd like to get some pictures. I know their parents would love it. Is their coach in attendance as well? Yeah? Coaches? You have to fight for it. Yeah, no, back over there. They can't come back here ever again. Or when you win in Tampa, then you can come back there.
Here, my dear.
I was going to say. But I warmed this one up for you. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Next item on the agenda is open session. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business, which is not on this agenda. I'd ask, please, that you state your name and address and limit your comments to just 3 minutes. Anybody for, sir, please.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Souza, and I'm from Auburn, Maine. Is that enough? Let me see. All right. I can sit down, right? Is that all right?
Of course, no, please. Yes.
All right, so I'm here about 2 specific issues, and maybe like 1 or 2 that might relate to those 2. They're kind of 2 issues that kind of walk hand in hand. They kind of scratch each other's back. One doesn't exist without the other. One usually leads to the other. And both of them are seemingly somewhat severe in this part of the world. Deforestation and the lack of emission standards. By the way, I come from Massachusetts. Maine used to be part of Mass and everything. I've been here for about 3 years. Now, most people are not really that have been here, where their lungs developed in this region, are not gonna really be all that aware, as much aware of the effects of the exhaust, the emission standards, lack of it. And the carbon monoxide, which is one of the most powerful, like, disease, you know, the chemical can do more damage than great many things, and that hovers near the surface, near the first floor buildings and stuff. I live on Main Street, and I'm affected by it, and I'm affected by it a great deal more because from Massachusetts, our standards are extremely high. And where Maine has its issues, we're extremely rigid. Pretty much the whole country knows that. I've gotten a few comments from people going through New Hampshire and Maine, and I told them I was from Mass, and they said, "Oh, all right, that explains it." And I was like, "What was that about?" And I'm like, okay, I'm understanding now that Maine and Mass, they're kind of like 2 sides of a coin. They truly are, and it makes sense that you split from Mass. And there seems to be a lack of, it seems to be like you took what Mass was, extreme regulations about everything. You flipped the coin over, and you said 0 regulations. Let's not enforce things. Let's just not be Mass. And unknowingly, you became just as much of a problem as Mass, yet in a flip side kind of way, like reciprocal equality, you know, like a heads and a tails, tails and a heads. And so basically, I can walk down the street, just so you have an idea. I can walk down the street. By the way, I'm vegan. I don't eat I eat almost nothing with preservatives. I'm a non-smoker. I drink very little, and I do little of puff, puff, pass. Most people are going to know what I'm talking about there. And I'm just like a little bit of this and a little bit of that kind of guy, very healthy. So I walk down the street. I can get sick within 15 minutes if I walk to some place and then come back 2 or 3 hours later. I can be sick for 3 or 4 hours, a little bit nauseous, headache, feels a little weird. And I'm a little hyperactive, so it'll affect that. I'm a little more a little more anxious, and I'm gonna have a little more of a chip on my shoulder. And I've got like one the size of Texas for most of my life. I got to tell you, my attitude, and it doesn't help. And the thing is, there's the river that's polluted. That was mentioned earlier. And it's been polluted, and I said something to the senator, I believe, at the library. That was, I think he goes there twice a year to the Auburn Library. And I said something to him, and he said, yes, we were polluting quite a bit, or it is somewhat polluted, yet we're polluting less now. And I was thrown aback. I was like taken aback and beside myself by the nonchalant, cavalier kind of way he said that. And I was like, here's a as a metaphoric kind of visual aid for you of how I see Maine in the environment, okay? Here's the environment. Here's the environment. Here's Maine. And here's what Maine is doing to the environment. A slap and then a back slap. Because what you have basically is people driving nonstop, like about 16 hours a day, 14 to 16 hours every day. And it's not just 6 days a week. It's every day, no matter whether people are working like 40-hour days or whatever. It's an addictiveness. It's addictiveness. There's a great deal of addictiveness.
And thank you very much for your time. I do your time
And
is up right now, sir.
actually, this is public comment.
It is, but we have limited public comment to 3 minutes. But
And no, I'll
give you a little
give
bit
me a
of-
couple more minutes because this is public comment, whether you like it or not. I'm
Oh, I love
public.
it. Absolutely, sir. That's why
I'm
we have it.
public, and I have a right to talk.
You do, but we also have a right to
So,
continue with the agenda.
here's
But
the
I'll give you
thing.
30 more seconds to wrap up.
Here's the
your
thing. I
comments.
want to say something. Two things. Something about politics. You're going to like this. Politics, and this is said by Albert Einstein. Politics is a pendulum whose swings between anarchy and tyranny, fueled perennially by rejuvenated illusions. That's one thing. And it's true, because what I'm getting here is you're kind of rushing me out because you're feeling a little uncomfortable from what I'm saying. You're not going to admit that to me. That's most likely what's going on. And then the last thing is just a little bit of the lyrics from the song by Rush. Neil Peart, one of the best drummers ever to live. And the men, that would be everyone standing up here right now to some degree. And the men, women, and men who live in high places must be the ones who start to mold a new reality closer to the heart, closer to the heart. So if anybody up here really wants things to change, two things to focus on: the driving, the amount of driving, the lack of exhaust emissions, which affects neurological, which affects your brain and everything about your brain and how people talk, the low testing scores, and the deforestation. And one last thing, over the last 2 years, if a hospital has trouble and they have a lot of complications and they do things incorrectly, they get cited. Last summer, it's one of only like the 7 or 8 times I've ever looked at a paper in the last 3 years in Maine, and for some reason I saw this. It's like I was meant to see it, so I could say it right now. The last 2 years in Lewiston, we've received 3 citations in the last 2 years. St. Mary's has received citations twice, 2 years in a row. Take a bow. CMMC has received it once. And just so you know, I just want to say something here.
Sir,
Just
it's been.
just want to, yeah, and I'm very
Please
close.
wrap up if you could.
I will.
Thank you.
Just so you know, I'm not against Maine, which I've come across like that, very much so to many people in this state. I'm not against Maine any more than I'm against Mass. I'm not for Maine any more than I'm for Mass. I'm for the planet, and I really like people to stop focusing so much on their own lives and look at the big picture and focus on the planet, because the planet is what matters. And here's one last quote, and
Yes,
I'm
sir.
done.
Actually, thank you very
No.
much for your time. I think if you
Peace.
stick around, you'll actually
I'll
see
sit
us.
here until I finish the quote. It's about 2 sentences. So you'd let me finish. There you go. I think I'm winning on that one, too. Peace is not the absence of war. It is a virtue, a state of mind, a disposition for benevolence, confidence, and this last one, justice, kind of balancing things, looking at the whole deal. Well, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
enjoy the evening, and please think about what I've said. And I hope some of the people that have connections will think about what I've said, because the
Is there
people that
anybody
are
else for
driving around and around, they're not happy.
Sir,
These
Thank
kids
you.
are not happy.
Thank you. We have
People
given you
have
more.
almost gotten hit on crosswalks. People are afraid to cross the street, even on crosswalks. I've seen this, even in Hannaford. You gotta get involved in this stuff.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak during open session? Okay. I will now close open session. There is no unfinished business tonight, so we're going to be moving on to new business. The first item, under tab 1 of your notebooks, which is the approval of a liquor license for Craft Brew Underground, LLC, located at 34 Court Street. I'm going to entertain a motion for this right now.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve liquor license, we approve order number 05-0122-018, approving the liquor license, beer and wine, for Craft Beer Underground LLC, DBA Craft Brew Underground, located at 34 Court Street. Public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion for Councilor Titus and a second for Councilor Walker. I will open this topic up for public hearing. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the council. Is there any debate? I'll open this wide up. Everybody's had a chance to look at this in your council.
Yes.
Any questions, comments? None being said? Now, for the vote, by show of hands, all those in favor?
This is a,
All those in favor? All those opposed? Abstain? None being, motion carries 7-0. Next is a resolve authorizing membership in the Maine Service Center Coalition for 2018 and designating Peter Creighton, City Manager, to be appointed representative, and Denise Clavette as alternative representative. Do I have a motion?
I would move resolve 03-0122-2018 with respect to the membership to the Maine Service Center Coalition for 2018.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Hayes and a second from Councilor Fournier. I'll now open this up to members of the public for comment, including City Manager Creighton, if you'd like to speak on this. I know you weren't here during the workshop last week. Or
No,
last meeting.
I was not here. I'm supportive of this, and I recommend it. I think the City of Auburn can add a lot to the Maine Service Center Coalition with the issues that we're facing at the state legislature that seem to be perennial issues. I think it's an important group for us to participate in and belong to. I know that the Assistant City Manager spoke about this recently with the workshop that was held on this item. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the work that we're doing with other municipalities and the importance of this Service Center Coalition to try and advocate for the interests of the City of Auburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Creighton. No other comments from the public. I'm going to bring it back to the council for debate. Just to launch this off and refresh everyone's memory a little bit, during the last workshop when we discussed this, there is a price tag involved. I believe it's roughly around $2,700. It's based upon population. Yeah, there's always a negative stigma about lobbying or groups and whether or not they do much good. I will say I've seen it firsthand in the private sector that contributing to a lobbyist to help educate members of our legislature that we cannot reach just as one municipality well beyond our borders is important. This is a one-year commitment, correct? I think we should evaluate this at around the same time next year when we're up for renewal and see exactly how effective it's been. But I would encourage the council to think about this and approve this resolve. With that said,
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question? What line item will this come out of, since we didn't budget? This wasn't in the discussion in the budget.
Correct. This will come out of the City Manager's office budget. And the line item is the having to do with our activities, and there is funding in that account.
Thank you.
and starting off with Councilor Young, Councilor Lasagna,
I support this.
Councilor Hayes,
I support it as well.
Councilor Titus.
Well, I mean, at the workshop, I was pretty boisterous. I don't support this. I think, first of all, I hate to spend money in the mid-budget. I like to have it in the budget, and if we can't wait a year to do that and add it to the next budget, then, I'd have a problem with that. But also, I do not see us seeing any value from this that's measurable. I think the reason why we stopped doing it was because we didn't see any measurable benefit from it. We may benefit other communities by being part of it, but when I see 29 of the 71 service center organizations, some of them are small enough to only pay $500, I'm sure, or $1,000 to join, and they don't belong. I don't know that I see a value, except maybe we're more valuable to them than they are to us. And it also, my point is, it may be just one more thing, but then there's another one, before you know it, we're spending a lot of money on things that we think are going to work, but we have no way of measuring. Talked about a year from now, let's see the benefit. We can't measure the benefit in a year or 2 years. I don't think you can measure the benefit of this. This is purely political. It's not going to get us back anything. So I'm against it for that reason.
Councilor Fournier?
I know what advocacy is all about, having been a principal and a teacher for half my life. And I know that if you're not there to voice your opinion and to represent a certain group of people, then you don't carry very much weight. Things can be forgotten. I know that the cost, it goes by population, so therefore ours is more expensive than some of the others. However, we're not the highest. Our fee is not the highest. I think it's important to understand that as we are a service center, we're going to continue to be more so. More and more people come, through our gates, and they need services. That's why they come here in flocks. And I think that we need to be able to discuss with others what's going on in their communities, what do they find to be constraints or celebrations, and what's working for everyone. And I think our voice needs to be heard as a large service center area. I would like to be able to see this for a year. And yeah, measuring the progress or success of this is going to be difficult. It's going to be in terms of the person who is going to represent our city, and that would be you or Denise, I would assume. And so that way, you will come back, keeping notes, letting us know, reporting back on this at our meetings to let us know what happened at this month's meeting. This is what happened, this is what we did, and this is what the outcome is. I think it's important to have a voice there.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Councilor Walker?
I'm between a rock and a hard place with this. I really think that the city manager should have brought us something that really has a goal of where he thinks this may go, so that we understand more about what we are spending our money on. I don't like the idea in the middle of the budget saying we would like to do this or that and spend the money and say, okay, it's all right to do that. There's nothing right now for this city to gain by paying this year's intuition or whatever we want to call it. This could wait until our next budget. We could jump in then. Everything is already passed that we would argue over. Lobbyists are up there fighting for whatever they're fighting for anyway. So win or lose, I think we're going to be giving $2,700 away.
Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Maine Service Coalition isn't a new idea. The concept has been around since, I think, 1998. A former city manager Mark Adams was on one of the steering committees that had done some sort of study on service centers and was part of the coalition way back when. It hasn't grown much. In fact, it's been downsized since then. I see the value of the coalition. I see the good things of networking. I see the value of joining this type of thing. But there's more to it than just paying a lobbyist to lobby the state and federal government in order to try to help us posture ourselves to get us the benefits and the revenue sharing and the things that we need. I would be more comfortable providing this money if there was more than just lobbying. I mean, if there was a document that says that this percentage goes to pay for lobbying, this percentage pays an office person or a facilitator to help have quarterly meetings where the stakeholders, the different municipalities, get together and they hold meetings, they brainstorm how they can collaborate and do things together. But so far, all I can see is just lobbying and stuff. I mean, there is no budget. There's nothing tangible. And, I mean, $27,000 is
Excuse me,
peanuts.
Councilor Garrett, 2,700.
I mean, thank you. $2,700 is peanuts compared to our budget, but it all adds up. And right now, the legislative session is a short session. It's only going to be in existence maybe 4 months, and then the bills are going to be gone. So that's an awful lot of money, and then there's going to be a whole lot of downtime. And that's the time that is needed to try to corral some of these new candidates that are running for the State House. But there's nothing in there that says that this coalition is going to try to reach out to these candidates to train them for what the municipalities need as part of this coalition. It doesn't say it's going to teach them about revenue sharing or anything. So I can't, in good conscience, vote to support this, even though I believe that the Service Center Coalition is a worthwhile tool for the municipalities, because there's nothing for me to reach on to grasp and reach around.
And very good points. I think if I could, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Creighton here in just a second. I'd just like to summarize. As someone who's been to Augusta quite a bit over the years, I have come to learn the value that lobbyists can have in certain aspects. And I will say, we as service centers, as larger municipalities in the state, are at an unfair advantage. And we have a natural, inherent kind of we're behind the rural areas, because Maine is a rural state. The rural areas are a block, and they know that, and they can protect that block. As a larger municipality in the state, we have to band together, because if we don't, and we rely on a diffusion of responsibility for someone else to do it, or, you know what, we won't pay our $2,700, we'll let someone else do it. It's almost kind of that herd mentality. Diffusion of responsibility in this case probably won't work. We do have to fight as cities, and we have to try in a number of different avenues in order to have a larger, louder voice, so that we can make sure there's parity and fairness across the board, and stop seeing an unfair tax burden put on service centers versus the rural communities that need the service centers to survive. So I'll say that, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Creighton for some parting thoughts before we put this to a vote.
I appreciate everyone's comments. I would just summarize my reasons why I think this makes sense. There are a number of communities that participate in the Service Center Coalition that we would be working with. There are over 20, City of Augusta, City of Bangor, City of Waterville, City of South Portland, Brunswick, and others. We have a natural alliance with those communities. Having worked for the City of Lewiston many years ago, before I went to work for Cumberland County, being a member of the Legislative Policy Committee, I remember going to those Legislative Policy Committee meetings and seeing the influence and the impact of the small rural communities, and the inability of the larger communities to be able to be successful in terms of the issues that were important to larger communities. That is the essence of why the Service Center Coalition was formed, because the larger communities like ourselves and service center communities were not able to be effective at the Maine Municipal Association. And that's why the Service Center Coalition was born, and the Service Center Coalition has been quite effective over the years. I'm concerned about the revenue sharing that we receive from the state, which is $1.5 million annually. We were very fortunate to get $1.2 million plus in school subsidy funds for our budget for this past year. That is very important. We need to work together with the other municipalities. We can't do it on our own. I think that's the reason why we need a coalition, why we need to collaborate and work together. I appreciate the comments that have been made. I think that the value in joining now is being able to work with the other municipalities to strategize about what we're going to be doing for the next session of the legislature, as well as any issues that remain with this session, and to think strategically and work strategically to try and accomplish the things that are important to the city. And I respect everybody's view, but that's been my experience, and I would recommend that we join.
Not just staring at you to put undue pressure on you.
Well, no, I'm just, and I agree everything with what you're saying as far as what could happen, but past history, and Councilor Gary made the notion that over the years it's declined, membership has, and they haven't gotten stronger over the years. So
let's make a distinction here, too. There's also the Mayor's Coalition, which we're no longer members of. Lewiston is. We didn't see value in that well before your time, and my time, of course, in the last administration, and pulled out of that membership. So there's, if you say, competing things. So I don't want to say the Service Coalition and the Mayor's. I don't want to, the Mayor's Coalition, I don't want to compare and contrast two separate organizations.
yeah, I just think we have to be careful, because this is just $2,700, but there are a lot of organizations out there, a lot of things. And 2 years ago, we made the conscious decision to increase our economic development department, hire more people, get something going really strong to drive Auburn, and we stopped a lot of these small little things we were doing because we put that money towards that. And now we're going to start spreading out again and put more money in all these different pockets, and before we know it, we're going to be, our budgets are going to be out of control again, thinking we're doing well. And it's not going to bring any results. It's just going to bring us bills. That's my point.
If there's no more debate, I'm going to bring this to a vote.
Mr. Mayor, I was wondering if it's a possibility, if we did consider this membership, if the year is a short year, is there a possibility for a discounted, price for the rest of the year? I don't know when it goes from what's the date of the membership?
Fiscal year.
It's the fiscal year, so we might consider that. But again, to make one more point again, when you're in the throes of the discussions dealing with Maine service centers, that I'm using that because this is the topic that we're talking about, you have the opportunity to have connections. You're connected with people, you know what the trends are or the trends are going to be, and I think that, normally we may not get that information or be privy to what's coming down the pike. And I think that it helps us in our planning, budget-wise, in order to be able to participate in this.
Thank you. We're going to bring this to a vote by a show of hands. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? Abstain? None being, the motion carries 4-3. Next on the agenda, order authorizing an order authorizing staff to enter into an agreement with Real Term Energy for the LED streetlight conversion project. Do I have a motion?
I move that we consider order number 06-01-222-018, consider passage authorizing the staff to enter into an agreement with Real Term Energy for the LED streetlight conversion project.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Fournier and a second from Councilor Walker. I'm going to open this up to the public for public comment. And I do believe we have a representative from Real Term Energy here. And I do see a big brown box. And you brought it?
Good.
If you could please come forward.
Yeah, you requested to see one.
They looked at me kind of odd, but I want to, if I buy something, I want to touch it.
See it. I get
And I saw the pictures and they look very interesting, so please, approach the bench. I don't know what you call it, actually. What is this? The bench works. Thank you.
This is a sample 25-watt Cobra head luminaire manufactured by Leotech. It wouldn't necessarily be the one that we choose for the project. It's what we're going to do competitive bid. It just gives you an idea on sort of the aesthetic aspect of some of these lights.
Is this an average representation of what we could see in the city of Auburn?
For smaller wattage, yeah. You'll have yeah.
Does the case, the shell actually change in size, or is it just the amount of bulbs?
Well, you have different amount of diodes. Depending on the manufacturer that you select, and also you have longer Cobra heads, depending on the light distribution pattern that we're looking to hit. But just a sample. There's a lot of analysis that's going to go into making a final decision.
But they're all fairly similar in size. Slightly different.
Some are longer, some are rounder. That's another aesthetic decision that you may make. You may prefer a rounder rather than a square type Cobra head.
Okay. Okay, very good.
What's the container made of?
It's, you gotta turn it over too so you can see what the birds will see.
How many lights there are, you know, just so few lights and just 4 little
Diodes.
I know, it's like, cool.
I'm sorry, you probably should talk again.
And
I
is
asked
there,
what the material of this light is.
So it's a metallic compound. The LED technology actually favors cold weather. The efficiency of the light fares better as the temperatures go down. We have these deployed as far north as the Arctic Circle in Ontario. We've never had any problems, never had any failures.
Thank you.
great. I do know that, and thank you very much for bringing this in.
Yes.
This is great, and if you could, maybe circulate it if anybody in the audience or finance director or city clerk would like to see it as well. Is there any debate from the public or any comments from the public on this as we move forward? There's some additional supplemental information provided to the council from Ms. Clavette, answering some of the questions. So I just want to make sure, bring that to the attention of the council on that. It is in your agenda.
Mayor, I had one question.
Councilor?
It mentions that the ancillary jack for holiday lights will be an add-on feature. I think we have to wait and get a question. Is there an additional cost?
Oh, Derek, we have those answers, right?
At this time, we can't add an additional jack because these lights are unmetered. So in order to do that, they'd go to a metered setup, which would cost a lot more money.
Okay, is there a plan to be able to accommodate that capacity?
There can be a plan if it was desired. But our current infrastructure would stay the same. So where we have Christmas lights now, it would be the same. It wouldn't change.
Okay.
What you were asking for is additional outlets, correct?
Right.
Or at least the same amount. Councilor Walker, if that was correct, could you clarify?
We'll have the same amount that we currently do. That won't change.
Okay.
Is this project here going to be part of the Main Street, finishing Main Street from, we'll say, Drummond Street down to Court? Because all of them lights are 25 years old and they're ready all to be thrown away. So is this going to be part of that section of the street or not?
I'm not sure if we own them currently or they are CMP owned poles.
Well, they're more like the
If there's
rest of the Main Street
Yeah,
poles.
if they're ornamental, I believe we own them. So I'm not sure. Jill might know if Charlie had put in some money for those. We can get back to you on that. We'll look into it.
Because we already own those lights.
We do or don't?
We do. So
But
that
it's
wouldn't
been-
be part of this project.
Okay, wouldn't
That would be a separate project.
Okay.
There's also a couple of notes, too. I'm not sure if you want to speak about this, but there are add-ons to these lights, i.e. dimmable, Wi-Fi enable, cameras, and so forth. Those are all come as an add-on, correct, post your full audit?
As part of our services, one of the first things that we'll do with you is we'll have a consultative session going over the costs and benefits of smart controls and other smart city applications. These are items which might be of benefit to Auburn. They may not be. We're not here to sell it to you. We're here to understand what your needs are, and then based on your needs, we'll recommend the appropriate technology.
Very good, and that will come in a letter point. Okay. And just so the council's aware, this vote will authorize, Mr. Crane, correct me if I'm wrong here, $81,000 to jumpstart this project now. Correct. Okay. Is there any more debate or questions? I know we talked about this at length in the workshop last meeting. We'll start off with Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I've had several calls about the concerns when they heard it mentioned that we could potentially put cameras on these poles. They wanted, if I voted for this, they wanted my assurance I would not support this if we were going to put cameras on these poles.
You want to talk about cameras that are already there everywhere watching us?
There are cameras already here in the city. I wish Phil was still here, the police chief. He could address the question better than I can, but there are already cameras.
So I think that
It's very normal for cities of our size.
I think what we're talking about with potential cameras is in high traffic intersections, traffic monitoring and so forth versus an invasion of privacy. But at this point in time, that's not in the budget, it's not on the table. The potential for them to be there, but it would have to go through the council for debate and approval on that point, because it would be an additional funds allocated.
And then one more question, dealing with if we get the lights in like around New Auburn, once we get more construction finalized down around downtown New Auburn, will we be allowed to have, I know, electrical outlets for like different activities we have, like for the United New Auburn events and things?
I think what you're asking would be separate from this project.
Okay.
Councilor Walker?
We had, I'm going to guess, 400 lights taken out, shut down, whatever. This price has nothing to do with them 400. Am I correct?
You are correct. Now, if there's a desire to add more lights as part of this project, we can do that. And they could outline the costs and if you...
But just for instance, say you got 1,250, say we need 625. Does that mean this price will go by multiplying that same amount again, instead of being, what did you say, 8,400? This is so small again.
Well, the started off, it's going to be $81,000.
Okay, 81,000.
But this is the total anticipated price, as is for the lights, is around 750, 770 total.
So does it,
for
yeah.
1,253.
Does it mean it goes to $1 million if we add 600 more lights? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's on a per light basis. So up or down, depending on the final numbers, once the audit is complete.
The audit is baked into the price, and then I will come back and we'll have to make as a council determination with city staff consent and conversation about whether any additional lights are needed, and if so, where. So this is just basically a one-for-one exchange of current operational lights.
Yeah, but we all know that pretty near every councilor knows they've been asked, are we going to replace lights? Mm-hmm. And there's been many taken out of the city in the last 15 years, many.
Councilor Fournier?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm repeating what I said last time, and that is that, you know, I've lived in a neighborhood that was not lit well. It used to be when I first arrived there 43 years ago, and now there's one light on the street. I am a believer that we need to have very, very safe streets so that our public can walk on the streets and feel like they can see things, you know, as they're going along. My only question would be, I do approve of this type of lighting. I think we're going to get every bit of our money is well spent, but I would like to make sure that where those lights go, since we know we have a lot of them that were taken down, and some of them that need to be taken down, I would like to have people weigh in on what are the areas where we really do need to put these lights, so that they're not all, you know, in one location.
Councilor Titus?
Yeah, thank you. As everybody knows, I'm a big supporter of this, and I do want us to look at what it would cost to replace all those lights, and then we can decide from there, but we got to see what it's going to cost. But one question I had was the agreement. The resolve talks about entering into an agreement, and I want to make sure this is not an agreement to buy or purchase anything yet, because I understand there were two options. There were a lease plan deal, and there was a bonding, and we haven't decided which way we want to go with that. So the agreement we're going to sign is simply to get the survey done, get the inventory done, and know where we stand with our proposal. Is that correct?
That's correct.
There'll be nothing else but that, okay.
That's
Because I know we need to decide whether we want to lease this thing or we want to bond it outright, and that's another workshop, so.
Correct. Thank you. But this at least gets a process moving.
This gets a process.
And we can dovetail off what other communities are doing for economy of scale.
Very good.
Correct. Okay. Councilor Hayes?
Thank you, Andy. You clarified questions I've been about.
No elbow this time.
No elbows on that one.
Councilor Lasagna?
No comments, thank you, but I'm in favor.
Councilor Young?
I was interesting, the question on the cameras, because we do have cameras throughout the city. When I was on that subcommittee, I think it was one with Councilman Walker, the chief said that they do video at whatever, but they don't really look at the video unless there's a crime in the area. So it's not like somebody's sitting at something under surveillance of people privacy, you know, walking down the street. But we can't tell you where the cameras are, but we do have them.
Yeah. Very good, thank you. If there's no further debate, I'm going to open this up to a vote. Now for a vote by show of hands, all those in favor? All those opposed? Abstain? Not seeing. This motion carries 7-0. Gentlemen, thank you very much. You can leave that light there. I'm going to take it home.
That is man
He
cave.
needs some.
I'm going to put that right in my kitchen, right over the
Get
sink.
a long driveway, you need that light
Great.
there.
Last item on the agenda is a resolve supporting the formation of a mayor's ad hoc committee on economic development and marketing. Again, this is a resolve supporting the formation of a mayor's ad hoc committee on economic development and marketing, clarify from the previous council meeting. Do I have a motion? We go nowhere fast. Do I have a motion from the floor?
Go ahead.
Yep, you want me to move? But okay, I move that we approve the resolve 04-01222-018, which is supporting the formation of a mayor's ad hoc committee on economic development and marketing as recommended by Mayor Levesque.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilor Fournier, seconded by Councilor Gary. I'm going to open this up to the public for any public comment. None being, I'm going to turn it back over to the council here for comment or discussion. I'm going to lead off just with a little analysis and just a little commentary on this to kick it off, and love to hear what you have to say. As I said during the inaugural address, I believe we need to bring our best and brightest to bear and to serve in order to help Auburn market itself and grow its economic base as more of a collaborative effort. So that's what we're going to be trying to do. The ad hoc committee will survive for approximately 12 months. There, as outlined, they'll be responsible for feeding back to us recommendations, ideas, concepts, best practices utilized in municipalities and in the private sector around the country, and obviously locally here. I've selected Matt Leonard to be the chair of this committee. Matt has a lot of experience in government, the private sector, as well as non-governmental organizations as a past chair or president of the LA Metro Chamber of Commerce. His assets, along with the initial members of this committee, I think are going to be very, very, very impressive. Now, this committee will be a little bit different. It's going to be ginormous. So if that's actually a word, we're going to use it.
Yes, it is a word.
Talking with people, I cannot, out of everything I've said and done as a mayor, and albeit 90 days or so, I have not seen anything with a reaction from the public as this. I've had email after email from people that I had no idea lived in Auburn, people that own marketing firms, people that work in the tourism industry, people that, you know, have great ideas and actually tangible products to bring and ideas. So I'm really excited about this. So that's going to be different. It's going to be large. Now, where do we put 100 people for a regularly scheduled meeting? Well, we don't. Not often. One of the problems that municipal government has had, in my opinion, is a very set, defined meeting schedule where everything has to be done on a certain date. And in today's reality, if you would, there's so many pressing sports activities, business needs, trips, and so forth. It's hard to get everybody together, or at least a quorum of folks together, in order to have meaningful, thoughtful debate and dialogue and involve the public. This committee will have a tertiary goal, which is to work with an online methodology to conduct an ongoing meeting that is fully transparent to the public, where they can log in, they can read, they know exactly what's being said by who, under which topics. Opened up to regularly scheduled public input, comments, emails, postings, data share, and then supplemented with real in-person, face-to-face meetings by either subcommittees or committees yet to be determined. We feel that this would be a great way in a very controlled environment to see how great public participation and process participation can really be. And I think there's going to be some great learnings, either pro or against, that we can share with the community and with the council in order to see if this is something that engages the community in a greater level and yields even a more positive result. So there's a lot of different reasons to do this. At the end of the day, let's remember it's to help the staff, the city, the taxpayers realize economic development. It's also to help everybody realize what our assets are and how we let the world, or at least the region, know that we are one of the greatest cities in New England. So that's really our driving focus here. So with that said, I've spoken enough. I'm going to open up to comments, thoughts. Folks, I'd love to have your opinions. If not just now, it's going to be later on too. That's the goal. This is not a never-ending, or excuse me, an ending, say it now, forever hold your peace. But it'll be nice as a council for us to sit back and really process and consume the information and make thoughtful decisions based upon recommendations. So, we'll start off with Councilor Young. You're next.
No comment at this time.
Just a couple of things. Have you figured out the platform you're going to use for this? You don't have to describe it. I'm just, I'm really interested.
Yeah,
that
we'll circulate. Ning.
Okay, yeah, the Joint Charter Commission used that too, and it was really successful.
It was?
Yep.
Okay, good. Good to know.
The other thing is, do you have sort of a date about some kind of an executive summary? Because it's hard to facilitate these things moving forward in a very structured way, and this is freewheeling, and I think it's really interesting. It'll be interesting to see, but is there something so that when people ask us about this, we can say there'll be a draft executive summary or some?
There is. We started outlining a little bit in your councilor packet, but also we're going to be scheduling either the next city council meeting or the one directly thereafter, a workshop item with Mr. Leonard as well as other folks that are going to be in the committee to speak and outline this executive summary. It will be typed up, it will be circulated, and it will be posted for everyone to view, hopefully on the city's website. So.
Thank you.
Councilor Hayes?
Yes, I guess I reacted first to the length of this effort. I think earlier, the mayor suggested it might be a 3-month period, which might lead us into the budget, have some information going into the budget period. I guess my other concern is that, as you said, people are busy, but I know this effort is also going on at the chamber level. And I guess I'm a little concerned that, economic development is a wider community effort, and should be, because I think, again, whatever happens in the greater community helps us all. And I guess I am a little concerned of duplication of effort. And I guess, and I say that too, and I was going to comment later on the council reports. There was an insert in the Sunday paper with respect to the chamber and the real new focus, new vision, and that they're taking. And so I'm a little concerned with respect to the duplication.
And it's a very great question. Let me just answer that, and we'll go on with Councilor Titus here in a moment. First of all, the 3-month mandate from inception still stands, but there will be, that 3-month mandate has come up with a quick asset list of what we have for marketable assets within Auburn, and how best to go and get those assets known to the public, the greater public outside of Auburn. That was the initial 3-month charter, if you would. There is so many other things that are going to happen with this committee, and I think giving it a full 12 months to look at secondary, tertiary, spin-offs, things that have yet to be thought of, is fair, but it also doesn't extend its mandate out past 12 months, unless we do see, and agree as a council on this one, that it's a good process, and the results are worthwhile, and the process itself and getting those results are worthwhile. So that's one. Second, I will say that I don't want to duplicate anybody's efforts, of course, but the Chamber is a member-driven organization, and that's great. They serve a purpose, and I support that, but it's a non-governmental entity. And I do believe that Auburn cannot diffuse its responsibility to the citizens of Auburn. And of course, we have been, as a city, talking with the Chamber. We will to talk to the Chamber as a regional partner. But Auburn is unique. We are a separate entity. We're a separate city. We have separate, unique assets. And we have to look at those assets, and we would be doing the citizens of Auburn a disservice by not focusing our efforts, and at least the efforts of a mayoral ad hoc committee, on those assets and economic solutions for our city. Councilor Titus?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in favor of this, and only maybe because I don't yet know everything about it, so hopefully you'll give us more as we go along. But I see as economic development and marketing two different things. I see the Chamber as an organization that helps us market what we have, but the Chamber can't build what it is that needs to be marketed. What we have to do as a city is we have to build it. We're doing this recreational study that kind of told us what we didn't have, and now they're selling we have spent a lot of money to market something we don't have, but maybe we got to spend more money to get it first, and then we can market it. So I'm hoping there'll be a separation there. But secondly, I'd like to see this as a market-back feedback to us. And I'd like to include not just businesses, but landlords, everybody else who has a stake in economic development, because I think that they got to tell us what they need. What's stopping you from being successful? Tell us what it would take for the city of Auburn to make you successful. And then let them, regale us with all they can come up with. Whether we can do it or not, that's another story, another debate. But without that feedback, that honest and open and, hey, I don't know if it can work, but if you did this, I could do that. Well, then maybe we can do this, so you can do that. But we don't know sometimes because we don't ask those people, what does it take to make you successful? And so I'm hoping this committee is going to do that for us. We can make changes in the government. The Chamber can't make changes in government. All they can do is market what's already there. We need to build it. So I hope this committee is going to help us decide what we should build and what would it mean in true results, true measurable results. So that's what I'm hoping with this committee. Am I wrong, or am I?
No, I think you're spot on.
Okay.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's about getting a group of people that actually have a vested interest in success to give those ideas. We do want the committee reporting via the chair of the committee, as well as other members of the committee, regularly, either electronically or hopefully in a workshop setting, what's going on. It's going to help promote what our agenda is for the next 2 years. So, absolutely. And we do already, I know this, have talked with a couple real estate developers and property owners in Auburn, and they're going to be on the committee because they have a vested interest. They, to your point, are going to be looking at things in a different way. So, absolutely. Thank you, Councilor Titus. Councilor Fournier?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What you have proposed is excellent, Mayor Levesque, because this whole entire piece that you have laid out is something that we here as councilors cannot do. And we need a systematic approach to this, and we need it under one umbrella. And that umbrella is Auburn to begin with. Who knows where that's going to lead. I also am very happy with your selection of Mr. Leonard, because he, I have no doubt that he will do a superb job. And I think you have a lot of knowledge, a lot of background, and you're a good decision maker. So I look forward to seeing what you have for us at the first meeting and subsequent meetings after that. Good luck.
Councilor Walker?
I agree 100% with you. I think this is going to take us with the minds of the people in this city a long ways, and I think they're going to trust us, and it isn't going to cost us $160,000 a year.
That's right.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilor Gary?
I think it's a very innovative approach to solve a dilemma problem that we've had in the city. This way, we'll be connecting with every business, and it'll show businesses, whether they're the mom and pop type business to the biggest, most expensive business we have in the city, that they all count. They're all part of the fabric of the city of Auburn. They're all an important piece in the whole, in the piece of the puzzle, in the overall scheme of things, of what the vision we have to move the city forward. Today, if I wanted to go to try to find a list of the businesses we have in Auburn, I can only get a partial list. I can't get a complete list, because if a business rents a spot at a mall, or, because they rent, they may not be listed. This way, maybe a database, a listing can be created so that if a new business coming into town or a current one, if they need a product, they can go to this database and say, oh, I didn't know they made bolts that I've been looking for, and that I've been sending, have to check online way out of state, and it's costing me buku bucks. I could save on the shipping. I could get them here locally down the street. Or I've got all this product that this person over here could use. So I think I'm getting turned on just thinking of all the possibilities. So I thank you for throwing this committee, or putting this committee together. I shouldn't say throwing it together. And I thank you kindly, because I think Mr. Leonard is a very good choice, and I think he'll do an excellent job. And I like the idea that it's innovative, because of the way you're going to be networking out, so that anybody and everybody can be a part of it and can reach in and touch it. And I'm sure that this is going to create a lot of buzz. And like Councilor Titus said, this isn't going to cost hundreds and thousands of dollars. And this is going to generate a big return on our investment. And in the long run, it's going to generate a lot more revenue. So thank you kindly.
Thank you. And for full disclosure, the software system itself will be the cost. That will run roughly $1,200 a year to have this. So I want to make sure everybody's aware of it. City manager and myself will work on that aspect of it if we need to bring it back up to City Council in the debate. So if there's no other comment, let me get a vote by a show of hands. All those in favor? All those opposed? Abstain? Motion carries by a vote of 6 to 1 abstaining. Councilor Hayes abstains. Okay, we're going to be moving on here rapidly to conclusion. First, I would like to have our finance. I'm sorry, reports. First of all, it's my report. I'm not going to skip through mine, but mine is short. I know Councilor Titus wants me to skip through. Just a couple things. It's winter. It's an exciting time. I've said it before for everybody who's watching out there on TV. Please drive safely. But also, because it's winter, doesn't mean you have to stay bundled up in your house the entire time. We have one of the most exciting events this year planned for this coming weekend. It's the Auburn Winter Festival. Auburn's Winter Festival. Information is all over social media. It can be found online. There are fireworks at Lost Valley. There is skating in New Auburn. We have snow tubing, downhill cross-country skiing, and snowshoeing for all ages. Arts and crafts and movies at the library for the little ones. We have a torchlight parade and fireworks with a corporate sponsor, Spectrum Healthcare, at Lost Valley on Friday night. Ice carving, snow playground, and petting zoo. There. At Festival Plaza on Saturday and throughout the weekend. We have a tea party at the Women's Literary Union and much, much more. Folks, it may sound like a selfless plug, but it is. Please, everybody turn out. We have to publicize this. I will say that the City of Auburn staff has done an unbelievable job publicizing it for, I believe, an overall budget of $60. Literally, $60. So we need to help them. For all the counselors that are on social media, okay, I encourage you to participate this weekend coming up, and I am throwing out a contest. Here is my challenge. For every selfie taken at an individual event, the counselor with the most selfies at individual events taken and posted online, and has to be verified, I will be buying dinner for at a local restaurant on a date of their choosing, okay? And it will be a fabulous dinner. It will be a great dinner. Okay, and I know Councilor Walker's already thinking about where he wants to eat. So let's do a lead up. I mean, this is really about all of us getting together and working our networks and making sure that everybody in Auburn joins the festivities. It means a lot to staff, it means a lot to the citizens, it means a lot to all of us and the future of Auburn. So, from mayoral report, that is the biggest thing I have to say. Real quick, I did speak in front of the Chamber of Commerce along with my counterpart, Mayor Bouchard, at the Chamber's monthly breakfast. Fabulous crowd, actually, packed house. Very festive and spirited conversation. So I look forward to doing more of those. Other than that, we are just plowing through on city business. So that is my mayoral report. I will turn it over next to City Councilor's report. And if we could just, considering time, just brief, and let's hit the high points of that. It would be great. We're going to start off with Councilor Young.
Okay. I attended my first school building committee, along with the city manager and Councilor Lasagna. And there's not much to report on it because most of it was in executive session, but the committee that was in open session, they were talking about self-sustaining. And it took me halfway through the meeting just exactly what they were talking about, that zero or whatever, and they're talking about energy use and generating power and trying to come out even. I was a little skeptical, but I'm still listening and trying to be convinced that they'll be able to produce as much electricity as they consume. And they're narrowing down the choices of where they're going to build the school, but we're not going to stop building it because we haven't decided where. And
Is there any planned interaction with city government at all?
Well, we sit on the committee. There's 2 city councilors.
Yeah.
And the city manager, and it's they'll have to make a decision whether it's going to be at the present location or another location or a combination of both. And if they abandon the present Edward Little, then there'll be something that we will have to decide. If we sell the property or whatever, if that's the case. There hasn't been any decision, but I believe they're meeting with Department of Education. Is it next week? And maybe by that time, maybe the public can be involved in part of the selection at that time. But mum's a word until that happens.
Will the full council, maybe, Mr. Creighton, you have further update. Will the full council be involved in any of that decision making? Is there an executive session that happens beforehand? How's that process? If you could enlighten us on that. Not to put you on the spot, but.
I wish I could tell you the answer to that question. I'm not sure at this point. It is a work in progress. 2 councilors and I will keep the council informed as we go forward.
I think one of the things, I was at that meeting as well, that the Department of Education has quite a bit to say about whether they accept a site or not. So it's not just up to us. So that's the meeting with the Department of Education to present their thoughts on it, and the Department of Education will weigh in. So they have quite a bit of say in this. Wouldn't you say that? Yes. They also they visited 3 sites in Massachusetts, and there is a slideshow on auburnschl.edu news feed. So you can see a slideshow of the schools, and it's really worth looking at them. There were some really incredibly innovative and interesting designs that they looked at. They'll also be looking at schools in Maine. And Harriman Associates, I think people know, were at the meeting, and they're the ones who are designing the project. I also will be going to my first CDBG meeting. Oh, and I'm on the athletic subcommittee for the school building committee as well. I'll be going to my first CDBG meeting on February 7th and 14th to begin to review applications for funding for community services projects.
Thank you. Councilor Hayes?
A few things, actually. I thought through the various newspapers there was some good news, and one the mayor's already referenced. I thought a great picture was in the Twin City Times of the 2 mayors flanking Becky Conrad as the chair of the chamber. And I think then in the Sunday paper, there was an insert with respect to the chamber, and it talked to new directions. And, you know, and I think Becky was speaking that, you know, the chamber really is a welcoming and inclusive membership, and a foundation for, you know, special events and programs. She goes on to say that they've really taken over some other community-wide activities, particularly the BEAD business-to-business show, which they see this year being, you know, revitalized, be more inclusive of other than just, you know, just business. And I think, you know, it's been announced that, you know, the chamber has actually acquired the remains of the Economic Growth Council. So I guess that's why I hesitated a little bit and I abstained, because I do feel that even we talked earlier about the sports tourism report and so forth, and I think even we heard from Lewiston's mayor that he was disappointed as a councilor that he didn't know that we were embarking upon that study, and that maybe if he had known about it, that maybe Lewiston would have participated. Because I think, yes, we have assets on this side of the river, but there's equal assets on the other side of the river. Collectively, they make much more value as a community as a whole. So I guess, and the other piece that was in the paper was, the headline was "Good Things Happening, Historic Lost Valley," and it was read by Dave Irons. And I guess it's getting back to, it's unfortunate as the years roll by that we lose touch with history. And, you know, and Dave reminds us that, you know, Otto Wallingford was the one that opened with partners Lost Valley. And of course, he was an engineer, and he was very inventive, and he has patents. And I keep telling the story, and the story I heard is that, of course, he had the orchard, and as they do in Florida with, you know, with a freezing weather coming in early, they would go out and spray the oranges and to put an ice coating. So he had a big sprayer for his orchards, which he towed behind a tractor, and it was essentially an insecticide sprayer. But he was doing the same thing, filled it with water and was trucking down between the apple trees and just trucking along. And it was cold. He looked behind and he'd left a trail of snow. So, you know, the light bulb went on, and he did. He was the first one to actually develop snowmaking. Story goes, too, back when the Olympics were in Austria, and I think it was '66, if I remember correctly, it was a dry year in Europe. Otto Wallingford actually took a crew to Austria that year to make snow. And so, I mean, that's history. So, and he also was the first in Maine at least, to have all the slopes that he had at the time lit. So he actually introduced night skiing. So, and, you know, we've turned out some good skiers. You know, I think, you know, we know of the Kendall family. You know, he mentions Julie Parisian, John Bauer, I think Erickson. We had a jumper that went to the Olympics. And you know, and it also highlighted, there was an earlier piece in the paper, an editorial, and the gist of it was, you know, and it goes back to image and pride. You know, we are disappointed that we don't have as much pride, don't have as good image of ourselves or our community as we should. But this article is really suggesting that, you know, pride is founded upon community knowledge of community history. So I think that, you know, and I guess it's important for us to, you know, as we move forward, we should also be able to look back and review where we've been and why, you know, because of that, why we're here. You know, and reporting out on the airport, kind of the same thing. I guess it got me to, you know, look at the airport a little bit differently, because actually, you know, I think we all know that essentially that airport was an airfield back World War II for training. So it got turned over to the cities, two cities, 47, 48. It didn't really become an independent corporation or corporate entity until 79. And that's when, you know, the two cities entered agreements. And I guess originally it was recognized that Auburn would be providing the services, fire, police, et cetera, so that, you know, I think one of the first agreements was at least that, you know, the first 30% of any, because the airfield, there was the airport, but then airport properties are being shared by both cities, but 30% originally was going to go directly to the city for providing services, and then the other was going to be shared between the two. It was, and then I guess later in that year, or soon after, there was a tax-based sharing on on excise taxes. I think there's, and I'm thinking maybe there's still some sort of a sharing, or at least it was set up back at that time. And then actually there was a big project, and I think it was when Procter & Gamble bought Tambrands. That facility was expanded significantly because I think Auburn won the opportunity to actually, there was another facility that was actually closed, and Procter & Gamble brought that facility to this area. And I think at that time, we actually bonded, I think it was a $2.3 million, I think it was in a sort of a TIF agreement. And at the time, you know, we, through taxes, were going to recover totally. And then, at the time at least, Auburn was then going to get 82.5% and Lewiston 17.5%, because that piece of property originally was still part of the old airfield. So I guess bringing it more currently, we did see our chair for the last 12 years at the airport board retire. He had served on the board 19 years, so Ed Plord has retired, and actually is, Betty Ann Sheets is now the chair of the airport board.
Thank you very much for that update. Councilor Titus.
Just a few brief messages. First of all, I had a sewer department meeting last week. We didn't have a water department meeting because I guess the weather was too bad. But they have a very, very ambitious budget for infrastructure repair in the future of both the water and the sewer department. One of the projects they're doing is to save some money. They're actually putting a new cross-country pipe over by the airport, actually under one of the runways, to eliminate a pump station and go a gravity feed, which will save a lot of money in the long run. And they came right within budget this year, even though they had a little bit of issues with misreading the loss of Cascade. That was the last year, was a part of it was they were trying to gauge. So I think this coming year will be better. And I do like the ambitious infrastructure budget they have, and we'll be watching that closely. We have a separate area that I've helped them set up so we can see what they're spending on a regular basis on capital improvements, and we can see through the year what's going on. So hopefully we can live to that promise of, you know, more pipe in the ground. I did also want to make mention about the school building committee, and just a brief, maybe my opinion, but I think this council needs to get involved sooner, if not later, to decide what we're going to do, whether it's going to be the state-funded school or then a large amount above that, because if we let the building committee come up with this very beautiful plan and then we feel bad because we have to shoot it down or part of it or whatever, we should be in some sort of an agreement long before too much is committed. to what we're going to do for a school. I also want to mention the Lost Valley thing. I thought that was rather impressive. Dave Barnes is no slouch in the skiing industry, and to have him say things like that about Lost Valley should have us feel good knowing that there's a turnaround going on there, and Lost Valley hopefully will continue for many more generations, because many before us learned to ski there. And then lastly, I noticed we had a meeting for the Ag Study on Thursday, and I kind of read through the report and got some synopsis out of myself. A lot of material there. Are we going to see a report on that, or are they going to meet some more before we start getting some feedback on the Ag Study and what's going on there?
I will say, and Mr. Creighton, you might have some others, I just saw a release we're going to have. Yeah, there are more meetings coming up quickly at the end of January. I'm trying to open it up right now. A press release just went out on this topic. Do you have the exact date, February 1st?
Yes, I think February 1st is the next meeting. I've been going to the meetings. I missed the last one because I wasn't here, but I think a good step would be to have the chair, Mary Sylvester, come to a meeting, maybe give an update. I'm sure Mary would probably be happy to do that. Eric Cousins has been providing the staff support and has been doing a very good job doing that.
May I just ask a question in terms of, Councilor Titus, would it be appropriate once the site is selected that that's right away that we get involved? I mean, that's maybe a suggestion.
I think we need to get involved as soon as we're deciding what we want to do. And I guess we're visiting schools and getting an idea of what kind of a facility we want. And I don't know if it's already been predisposed that we're going to spend the state money plus $20 million, or the state money plus $10 million, or just the state money. I just don't want us to get down that road where we've got this thing, we want to bond 10 or 15, $20 million, and then we have to say no after all the work has gone into developing and planning for and having this wonderful building, and then we have to vote on it then. I'd rather have us talk about it long before we've gone down that road myself.
I think that's a good suggestion, and the school building committee is not meeting until, I think, the third week of February. So whatever seems appropriate in terms of getting involved, I think sooner rather than later is correct. I'm just not sure what the appropriate move is, whether Peter gets in touch. I don't.
There might be. I mean, this is a conversation right now about what is our tolerance, if you would, for overage above and beyond the state allocation of resources. I did spend a significant amount of time this weekend reading State of Maine guidelines on new high school building, what their minimum requirements were, what the overage or extra was. You know, for example, if you wanted to have different types of siding, that would be something that the city would have to pay for, or the school department, or an extra gym or auditorium. There's certain things that they will not cover as basic needs. I think it's really important for us to understand what that is. The methodology for us to get there might be as simple as having just a workshop item with the superintendent and chair of the school committee to explain very overarching the process, and for us to think about that, and maybe as we're going along there's a parallel path of keeping us involved, because at the end of the day we're going to, as a council and staff, be responsible for cutting a check, and that means we're going to have to go out to the citizens to ask for this money.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I understand the process correctly, we're going to even have to ask the voters, even if we don't go above. There's going to have to be a referendum.
Right.
But it's an easier argument or stance to say, listen, can you vote on something that's not going to affect your property taxes, versus, okay, this is going to increase it by X. But I do think getting involved in a parallel course, or at least getting regular updates for the full council, might be beneficial. I know there's certain things that are said within executive session that some of you are privy to, but not all of us can be. Okay, so there's a bigger question.
It's timely because those decisions will be made soon, and I would also urge including Harriman Associates in a workshop meeting, because they can bring some information that perhaps the other members wouldn't be able to.
Very good.
Yes, no.
That's what we asked.
I think that's a really good comment. I think we can have some further discussions on that as a city staff with the school department, and get some feedback to the council.
Yeah, very good.
Very
Yep,
good.
thank you, that's my report.
Thank you. Councilor Fournier?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. To piggyback on what all three of you have said, including the mayor, in terms of, input, March 7th is the community forum for this project, and I believe that's the only forum that's been held so far. I was a member of the first, high school committee, and we had to dissolve because we weren't sure whether or not we really were getting funds from the state. I do believe it's imperative that we involve the public as well early on, because the problem has been that you wait until the very end and you ask for all of this and then it gets turned down. So I think that we need to be transparent. Very, very important that we're transparent. So this is the one date that I picked up. I don't know if you heard that in your meeting, but I agree totally with what you're saying in terms of that, because we may want, something in addition, but if we do, we have to have the taxpayer's approval, because that's going to be a big bill. But it's exciting, I think the more input we have, the better, and the sooner, the better. So I'm reporting really quickly on two things. One is the school committee meeting, and the other one is the Auburn Library Board of Trustees, of which that was the first meeting that they've had since I was assigned. As far as the school committee, the new school committee reviewed and revised last year's school committee goals. And the group, and we were broke up into groups, and the group that I was in was with one other person, and I really wanted them to specify that the city council and the school committee start to work jointly prior to budget building and throughout the year. And I've said this a number of times, and I said it again, I would like to see it reflected on the goals. The other goal that I asked to be really fleshed out even more fully is to add a separate goal relating to building goals of excellence as far as school buildings, excellence, and increasing student performance. Yes, I know that we're a service-oriented city, and we have an influx of, I've been privy to that, and I know what that's like, where you have, students come and go, and then you don't know what you're going to have in terms of that baseline for scores. But students will learn if you teach them, and so I think that we need to deal with that and just celebrate our successes, and just we need to be able to see what the performance is. Everybody needs to be able to see that. So that was one of the additional goals I'd like to, and at our next meeting, we should be seeing the draft, the new draft of these goals. And a second comment was Shelley Mogul, who is the curriculum director, presented an update on Vision 2020, which means that in the year 2020, high school students will be graduating with a report card that is proficiency-based, a diploma that is proficiency-based, and she explained how it dovetails with the standards-based education, which began in 1997. I was a principal then, and I know that that began that early. And within the state of Maine, there were standards set forth, and we had to adhere to those standards. This had to happen in every single school system in the state of Maine. And now what we're seeing is words, concepts such as customized learning, personalized learning, proficiency-based or competency-based education. I asked Shelley, she did a fabulous, fabulous job. She has been at the helm here in terms of developing a program, a process. This took a long, long time to get to this point. She's done an outstanding job. It's a hard thing to do because it's about learning and how we think about learning. It's not just, here's the book, study it, and we're going to test you on it. It's just a whole different way of thinking. And I asked if she wouldn't mind coming, to speak before the council, and she said she would love to. And I have these for you to look at. I don't have one for everyone, but I have one for Mr. Mayor and Mr. Manager, and I have 3 extras for anybody who would like them, which explains what she presented. And so hopefully we will have her, invite her, and have her come over and spend a good, 30, 40 minutes and speak with us, because that's another whole component of our school system that we need to understand, and the wave that we're going to meet the demands of the future. I know my grandson is a product of this. I just love what he's doing. He thinks critically. He thinks in terms of learning. He knows how he learns best, and this is what we would like to see, for all of our children. So she has done an outstanding job and is continuing to do so, and I would love to have you listen to her and ask her questions. There was a second reading of the student wellness policy, and we had a finance report that still focuses on the demands that special ed puts on the school budget. And that is one of those influx of students that come. They come here because we do a great job, and so with that comes extra costs. And the thing that we talked about that I would like to drive home over and over again is that a lot of the students who have a lot of specific needs are sent to other locations, other programs outside our city. And if we were to hire just a few teachers who are, specialists in that particular area, of special needs, that is very all-consuming, the real, high needs, that would be it would be worth hiring a couple of people to be able to have our own program here, and it wouldn't be as costly, because I don't have the number for you, but it's a very, very high cost. And we can bring that down by having our own programs in-house, and that should be part of this plan for a new high school, a new school, that kind of thing. And finally, the Auburn Library Board of Trustees, they have included 4 additional trustees to have a total of 17 in all, because there's an influx of coming in and going out. They're looking for potential candidates who are passionate about our library and who would be recommended to the board from where a selection process will occur. And the last item that I have is that they always have an auction every year annually. I'm sure you know about it. Last year's goal was $8,000, and this year's goal is $10,000. And they're recruiting for donations of $100 to be called sponsors. Also, they're looking for donations of items, and you would be called a donor. And currently, the library has 11,000 card holders. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question? For the benefit of the people at home, will the school department come up with another way of having those standards, standings, or will we just not listen to those honor parts at graduation anymore?
That is the big question right now. This is a whole different way of thinking about student successes. They have, the proficiency levels are 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the state expects 3, level 3 for everyone, for all students. Level 4 is above and beyond. So that's where we base the premise on. As far as honors goes, it just changes the way we've done things up until now. The question is, the big question, I know I asked it when I was working as a principal and as a teacher, how many colleges are prepared for this? How are they selecting the students? So it goes beyond just our school system at the elementary, middle, and high school level. It goes way beyond that. Everyone has to be in sync with this, but everyone's getting on board at different points along the way. And across the nation, they're getting along at different times as well. Some places are better than others. So that discussion is going to ensue at the next meeting. And if you have any ideas or any questions, have them ready for if Shelley comes. She would be very willing to answer that question as to where we are with that.
There seems some sort of a stigma for A, B, and C, and D.
Yeah, exactly.
There's nothing wrong with a good F.
I think you said that the last time, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, you
And
did.
I'll say it every day to my own children and everybody else. There's nothing wrong with a good F. Failure is a quantifiable result, and you grow from it. Thank you very much. Councilor Walker?
Thank you. My reports are in our package. You can see them online. You can see them any place you want to go and look at them. But I do want to report out the Neighborhood Watch meeting is the 25th, the 4th Thursday of this month at 6th Street Congregational Church at 6:30. The United New Auburn Association is the 30th, which is Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. Our Auburn Police Chief will be there as the speaker. And on January 28th, that's a Sunday, from 11 to 2, myself and United New Auburn Association group will be there, hopefully with many kids and parents. From 11 to 2, sliding, skating, and anything else that we may want to do that day. But most important, we're going to have some munchies from Dunkin' Donuts and plenty of hot chocolate from Rolly's Diner. So please come on out and enjoy the day with us.
What time was getting again, Councilor Walker, I'm sorry?
11 a.m. to 2 p.m. that day on Sunday.
Thank you. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The LATC committee met the other week. I brought up the good Councilor Titus's concern about the 12:30 meeting. They kind of would like to keep the time at that because it's more convenient, because it takes a while if you're a patron of the transit system to try to get a transfer bus from Lewiston into Auburn, because sometimes it takes you a good hour and a half or longer to get from there, from wherever in Lewiston, to get to our downtown transportation center to get out to ABCOG, to attend the ABCOG, the LATC meeting out to ABCOG, which is out in Manley Road in Auburn, and then at the end of the meeting to try to time it back in order to get back home before the buses shut down. It's been brought up before, like you had said, about noontime or 12:30 is hard for people that work to get to the meeting. But if anybody that has read the packet online, if they have any questions or concerns, they can call me, and I'm willing to meet them at Auburn Hall to go over the packet and take down their concerns, questions. If they got positive feedback, I'm willing to write it down. If it's negative stuff, I'm willing to take that as well back to the committee, and I'll get whatever questions answered and addressed in a timely manner. Most of the things that we brought up at the meeting, we were talking about, like the policy issues for disruptive passengers. We're still working on that. We were talking about the money that the city's fronted for us until the federal money came in, and we should know hopefully by the end of this month when it's supposed to be in, if it isn't already in. I know they was expecting a very quick turnaround. All the paperwork's in, we're just waiting for it to come in. I went to the Rec Advisory Board meeting, and basically we were talking about the budget that they're going to be submitting and the CIP, and then we also were talking about the Winterfest, which is going to be a really fantastic event, that it's open to all Auburn residents and anybody that wants to come to it. And it's a lot of fun, and from what I understand, the weather's going to be good, and so I'm going to see if I can get some more pictures taken, but I'm not too cool with Facebooking. I want to see if I can compete with Councilor Walker and attend some of these events. So people are going to have to take pictures of me and throw them out there. So please take pictures of me at the events so I can try to beat Councilor
You can
Walker.
try, but remember, there's one other aspect to this bet. When I win,
Does that mean if you win, we have to take you out?
it'd probably be more than just one dinner. But yes, I will leave that to the senior member of the council to figure that out amongst the rest of you. But I will win, so be prepared for that. I don't lose.
And then, at my last council meeting, I brought up the fact that our general assistance office is in need of a lot of things like diapers of all sizes for those people from Auburn that come into the office that need general assistance things. They're in desperate need of diapers of all sizes, dish soap, laundry soap, cleaning supplies, deodorant, bar soap, laundry soap, toothpaste, toothbrushes, canned goods, anything that you guys, ladies and gentlemen at home have that they would like to kindly donate, we would like to take. And I did keep my word. It took me a little bit to get the boxes, but I've got 2 boxes set up. I've got one set up downstairs by the clerk's office, tax office, right by the information window. You can't miss it. It's a box for like a washer. It's a big box, and it says right on it, General Assistance Box, and I mean, it has more things on it. And then I also took the liberty of having another box put up here on the second floor in the corner under the TV that lists all the different meetings. So if anybody comes here to register their car, get a marriage license, do whatever you need to do in the tax office, come in here for any meetings, for any reason, if you have anything, please come in. Whatever you can bring will be kindly accepted. The only little request I have is when you put it in the box, please look in the box before you drop whatever is in there. Especially, hopefully it won't be glass so that it don't bang on something and break. If you think it's going to break, then please hand it to, if you bring it in on the first floor, give it to the lady at the information desk if you think it may break, or bring it to the General Assistance Office, just as a precaution. But they'll greatly appreciate it. And kudos to the appliance warehouse on Center Street that kindly gave me the boxes, and they're also, if I make a poster, willing to put a box in their center and collect donations for us as well. They were the only ones to give me free boxes. Every other business I hit up wanted to charge me $10 for the box. No joke.
Good boxes. Well, thank you very much for that, Councilor Gary. Okay, we're going to be moving on here to the city manager's report. Mr. Creighton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would first like to start by thanking Denise Clavette and the team here for taking over for the last meeting when I was on my tour of the high schools in Massachusetts. I appreciate that very much. I also would like to remind people the city has put out a City of Auburn recycling calendar.
Yep.
And I also want to mention in terms of the Mercy Medical Services division of the fire department, we have been working on an issue with the fire department, and we're now ready to move into a new phase where we're going to be looking at EMS more closely. I'd like to form a working group, and I'll be reaching out to the mayor and the council with some thoughts on that. I've been meeting with Jeff Lowe, the fire chief, to discuss how we'd like to approach that. I also would like to mention briefly, only because of time, and you may have already heard about this, the story about the town manager in Jackman, Maine, who made some racist remarks. That's not representative of my profession as a city manager, county manager, an assistant city administrator in Lewiston. I'm going to circulate a couple of letters that have been sent by the president of the Maine Town City County Management Association regarding that, who's Larry Mead, who happens to be the husband of the assistant city manager, Denise Clavette. I appreciate the leadership Larry's shown on this issue. And then also Jim Bennett, who was the president of the MTCMA at one time and the ICMA. This is a very important issue. I'm the immediate past president for the MTCMA, so we never want to see one of our colleagues make these kind of remarks. And in addition to that, I would like to also mention that there is a workshop that will be held next Monday, which will be a department orientation for the mayor and the council. Just as a reminder, January 29th at 5:30 p.m. Please be here. The department heads have been providing information to the city manager's office, and Denise Clavette and Jody have been working on putting that together. And I do want to mention in terms of the school building committee, there was a forum held with the community, which I went to probably 3 or 4 months ago. So the next one that will be held, I think, will be the second one. But I appreciate all the comments about the new high school. That's a very important issue and decision by the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Creighton. Going to move over to the finance report by the finance manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. We are halfway through the current fiscal year, and things are looking good. They're as I would expect them. The municipal revenues, including property taxes, are at 55% at the end of December. This year, the current tax revenue is actually about 4% higher than it was last year. And we saw an influx of people coming in December with the looming of a new tax regulations. So that brought, we're actually $2.8 million higher than we were at the same time last year. And a lot of people came in and paid their property taxes in December, not knowing whether they would be able to take it as a deduction in FY18. So that's the difference there. And our excise tax continues to come in higher than what we've budgeted. Not as much as it has in the past, because we actually made quite a large increase in the estimate for this current year's budget, about $400,000 more than the year before, but we're still coming in higher than that, so that's a good thing. Revenue, tax revenue, excise, and revenue sharing are our three major revenues, and that's why I usually highlight those. The other ones, you know, they help, but they're not big numbers. On the expenditure side, we're right in line with where we were at this time last year, and all the operating departments are right in line where I would expect them to be now. I will continue as we move forward to watch that, and if I see anything that's out of the ordinary, I'll address that and let you know. I've also provided you, as I do every month, the reports on EMS and some of our special revenue accounts, and both Ingersoll and Norway. I'd be happy to answer questions if anyone has them.
Are we going to be making payroll on Friday?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're good. Okay. I always have to ask. Without looking at the rest of the council, I know Councilor Titus has something to say.
Out of order.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you back.
Glad to be back.
Take yes. I just had a few. I just had a few inquiries. I'm going to make my inquiry again about the economic development expense line that still shows like it's not spending what I thought it would halfway through the year, and I think we got an explanation before, but I know that we had devoted a lot of money towards that department, but I see that of the $1.7 million, we spent $500,000, and we're halfway through the year. So I'm not sure, is that because payroll hasn't been expended, or there's some things we haven't spent there, I guess that's not necessarily a question for Jill, but maybe it's a...
I can get you, I don't know off the top of my head exactly which line. Payroll, they have had some vacancies. They had filled everything and they were up to speed, and then someone left, and so I know that there's probably the payroll line is a little low. There was money for, trying to think.
Sorry, I'm a little bit, it's a general question, because again, that's something that's one of our major focuses, so.
Right.
And I don't like to spend money, but when we've decided to spend it, especially something like that, I like to make sure that we're doing that. The other question I had was on the fire EMS. Is that line there, we had devoted a lot more towards that, so I would assume more would be going into that. Maybe we haven't hired the extra firefighters that we were going to hire yet.
I think they have the firefighters, but they just
Hired a director.
hired the director for the EMS, which is they're starting at the end of this month.
Cool, okay. And then the last question I had was relates to E911. Again, is that something they pay quarterly or semi-annually, or I see that it's $1 million budget item, but we haven't not a lot of money's gone to those there, so.
They bill, we pay them quarterly.
Quarterly, okay.
Right,
so
and
we'll
they
probably-
haven't sent for, I think they just sent it, they sent it late. Normally, it would have been paid in December, and we just paid it out the beginning of January. So then we'll pay again at the end of March, and then in June.
And maybe a question for Councilor Walker, who's on that committee. The next phase of their capital improvements, I mean, we did the tower, so there's the next phase. Is that going to be part of the CIP this year, do you think?
Yes.
Yes,
will.
he'll present it to
So as
all
soon
of
as
us.
possible, this committee, I mean, this council should see what
You'll be seeing the
we'll be
budget.
doing, because it's a big nut, I think, over the next couple, 3 years, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Jill.
Welcome. Yeah, but we are working, all of our internal and joint departments have sent me their CIP requests. They were all due at the end of last week, so it'll take me a little longer. I'm only working half-time for this week and next week. See how I do. If, after that, I should be back full-time. Their budgets are due to me by the end of this week, I believe it is, so. We're working on getting that together and setting up a joint meeting with the school department and the council to present that. So that'll be in March, I believe.
Thank you very much, Ms. Eastman. Is there anything else for the finance director at this point in time from the council? Ms. Creighton?
I should have said something about Jill being back here. Thank you, Councilor Titus. I mean, I don't want to say too much, but when she came in the office the other day, it was great to see her. We're all happy to have her back. Thank you, Jill.
Take care of yourself.
We are going to, hold on one second. I'm going to entertain a motion to accept and place on file the December 2017 monthly finance report.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion for Councilor Titus and a second from Councilor Walker. Now for a vote by a show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? None being. The motion carries.
Mr. Mayor,
Sir.
myself and Belinda just want you to know that we are working on the agent-friendly. We have, for our community, we have met with Doug Green, and he has been feeding us some great information and stuff. We're not up to date on all of it because there's so much of it, but we are working on it. That is as far as we've got at this point. So, but I wanted you to know it hasn't been dropped, and I wanted to report that out to you.
Thank you very much.
We're trying to condense it.
Yeah, it's a little big.
Yeah, make it a little bit smaller. Speaking of a little big, last thing I'll say, they're going to wrap this up for moving to open session. Actually, I'm moving to open session right now. We have the first open session, or second open session of the night. Is there anyone from the public wanting to speak at this period in time? None being. I now declare public open session closed. One thing before we adjourn for the night, I would like to tell the citizens of Auburn that's official. We have gone paperless.
Yay, huh? See? Yay.
For those of you who missed this comment last city council meeting, this is what every city councilor gets. Twice a month for our city council meetings. These are manually printed, bound, collated, all the fun stuff. Thank you to the city manager's department. Now that is all a thing of the past. We will never see these ever again. Thank goodness.
We'll see Sue Clemens running down the street going, hooray!
So everything is online, including our notes. It's a very, very efficient way to run the city. So with that said, we have no executive sessions tonight. I'm going to move for an adjournment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Fournier and a second from Councilor Walker. All those in favor? All those not in favor, none being. I declare this meeting closed, adjourned.